Hello lovely people, welcome to my autumn reading plans, TBR.
Dooby 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 doo. Dooby 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 Sophie vlogs.
If you are a long-term viewer of the channel, you will know that every autumn I tend to do a little TBR video. I like to view them just sort of as like a little mood board, so I might not read everything on this, but it's just sort of like a glimpse into what I'm feeling. I feel like autumn is a very evocative season for a lot of people. I certainly have certain genres and things that I'm in the mood for. Um, my only additional addendum to this is that I have been thinking about taking part in Gothtober, which has an extremely fun TBR builder that's like a little game where you build a monster, and then based on the monster that you build, you get prompts. I haven't done it yet, so there might be a follow up with like Gothtober TBR. I might take some of these and build my Gothtober TBR out of them, but for now, I just thought I would run you through like what I'm in the mood for. The first two books I'm going to talk about are actually because I have set myself like a long-term reading project. A little storygraph reading challenge that is Read the World. So the one I've joined is it has the 193 countries that are formally recognised by the UN, and then in addition it also has Kurdistan, Taiwan, Vatican City, and Palestine. So it's 197 countries in total. I have joined it. I am 29% of the way through based on all the reading I've done already. I think I've done 57 countries, which I'm actually really pleased with. I have been trying to read more globally just in general the last few years. So that's definitely much higher than it would have been had I started this earlier. So I'm going to try and like just generally when I'm buying books, rule I'm doing for it is that the country has to relate to the author. I can see from other books that have been added to it, some people do it where it's like the book can be set in that country or stuff like that. But what I'm hoping to get out of this is to introduce myself to new authors and to like expand my understanding and my worldview and that kind of thing. And so not all of the books that I read will be necessarily always focused on like the identity of that country or stuff like this, but I do want to view it as a challenge to read books written by authors that are from those countries, if that makes sense. Two books that I already own that I want to prioritize in this like autumnal season in order to like make some extra progress on that is Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi, which will be for the country of Ghana. This is so well regarded. I know, I've heard amazing things about it. So our start point of this is two sisters, one of whom is sold into slavery, one of whom is a slave trader's wife. And from there, we sort of go down through the generations and we see just like these two different paths of their families. I've heard nothing but amazing things. And then for Belarus, I want to read The Unwomanly Face of War by Svetlana Alexievich. I will recognise that at the time that she was writing this, Belarus was part of the Soviet Union. And she's a journalist, and she has brought together a chorus of voices to describe a specific historical moment. Specifically, what this is that she realised when she was growing up that she was surrounded by women who had fought in the Second World War, but their stories were not being recorded anywhere or told anywhere. And so that's what this is. I think it sounds really interesting. So those are two books that I have sort of earmarked for that project. A genre that I always like to read in autumn is like mystery. So I have two, but they're very different like tones. So the first one of these is Death on Gokuman Island by Seishi Yokomizo. This one is translated from the Japanese by Louise Kawai, who has done a couple of these by now. This will be my fourth Seishi Yokomizo. I have very much been enjoying him as, I think he has an interesting like genre play going on. So these are murder mysteries. They are quite gruesome and bloody, I will say. Like they go into a lot of detail often with like the murder technique and that kind of thing. But I think that lends itself to like, particularly the third book in this series, there was such like an elevated level of like horror, as in not like horrendously gruesome, but more like the bodily reactions of our main character, like was constantly like breaking out into sweats. Like he felt his horror very physically and viscerally and that kind of thing. I don't know, I've been enjoying exploring him as an author. I don't think he particularly writes women very well, but I've been enjoying just exploring. Each one of these has been very different in the type of mystery that it is, and sort of like not just like methodology, but also in some ways I think the way that it is playing around with mystery genre. Like the third book, it was almost like mystery and adventure and like that kind of thing. All I really know about this one is that it's Gokuman Island is like home to these two families who are like deeply feuding, and Kazuki Kindaichi, who is like the detective that all of these books involve, is like there to investigate some stuff. So excited to do that. My other mystery is like the complete other end of the scale. This is a Manor of Life and Death by Kim M. Watt, which is the third book in the Beaufort Scales cozy mystery series. So this is completely the other end. This is like this world in which it's like our world, but dragons exist, but their existence is secret. But they have an arrangement with the local WI in this little village where they're like friends. By this point, there is a detective inspector who sort of like knows of their existence, and it's extremely cozy. What I have found with these is that the actual mystery element is very much like a background in some ways. Like this is not a book that you read in order to like solve a mystery, but it is like a fun little mystery element that kind of runs throughout. Lots and lots of cozy village life descriptions, cozy food descriptions, and dragonish society and that kind of thing. So I'm hoping to get even more of an insight into the sort of like dragon magical side of things here, but this one has an actual murder at its heart again. So those are my like mystery books that I have. I also always like to do like a vampire thing. So I've got Certain Dark Things by Silvia Moreno Garcia. All I really know about this is that it's like vampires but with like Aztec mythology run throughout. I really like Silvia Moreno Garcia's writing. I enjoy the way that she writes very broadly across genre, so I feel like every time I dive into one of her books, I know I'm looking forward to exploring like a different slant, a different focus, that kind of thing. So I'm excited to give this one a go. Then also I have The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. This was recommended to me by Dia on last year's autumn reading TBR, so thank you for that. And if you do leave me recommendations, I do eventually pick them up. I picked this up like last year and I have been squirreling it away for this year's TBR. I know that this is somehow tied into Dracula, because I really like reading Dracula retellings. I just think it's a text that lends itself to being like revisited and all that kind of thing really well. All I know from the back is that like a young woman, while she's exploring in her father's library late one night, finds a cache of letters addressed ominously to my dear and unfortunate successor, and then she gets plunged into this like world of mystery and uncovers this like history of her family and all that kind of thing. So I'm really excited for this one. I hope it's going to be really atmospheric. A book that I mentioned already in my try chapter tag is The Library of the Unwritten by AJ Hackwith. This is set in essentially like a library that is based in hell, that is full of unwritten books, and then a character from the book has broken out and our head librarian has to go and like track it down. If you want like some fuller thoughts on this, I will link that try chapter tag down below because I read the first chapter and I talked about it. But as a result of that, I have earmarked this for sort of like a spooky season kind of reading thing. And then another thing that I always like to do in autumn is I really like to read something that is in some way tied into Greek mythology. I don't know why autumn, it's just become a tradition by now. The one I have for this time is Pandora by Susan Stokes Chapman. Unlike some of the ones on my TBR that are like posited in the classical time and like retelling the myth, this one actually is like drawing on the myth of Pandora, but it is set in, what is the actual year? London 1799. So Dora Blake is an aspiring jewelry artist, and essentially like her family have this antiquities shop, and then this mysterious pot, and she starts investigating its backstory, and then it leads to like a mystery. So this one is more of like a looser drawing on like the myth of Pandora, but I think Pandora is a really interesting myth. I actually wrote an essay on it once when I was at uni to do with Pandora as the first bride and all that kind of stuff. I'm intrigued by what this one will be like. Something else that is sort of becoming an autumn tradition is last autumn I read Hamlet by Maggie O'Farrell, which was my first Maggie O'Farrell, but I really enjoyed it. I found it super beautiful, and so this autumn I wanted to read The Marriage Portrait. That's it, yeah, The Marriage Portrait, not The Marriage Plot. I don't know where I got that from. This one is once again rooted in like a historical moment. We're following Lucrezia de Medici, and essentially she married this guy and then like a year later she was dead, and I believe this is like the marriage portrait. It is like looking at that. One thing I liked about Maggie O'Farrell that I felt lent itself to the autumn season was that Hamnet was so much to do with grief and that sort of thing. And for some reason, like autumn, because it's such like a transitional season, I feel like explorations to do with like grief and that kind of thing work really well for me in that time period, because you sort of are transitioning, not into like the dead time, you know, not to be like dramatic about it, but like, you know, summer is ending, you are transitioning into the slower months, like the dark and the cold and all that kind of thing. And so for some reason, doing like a little exploration of grief and that kind of thing like really works for me. And I'm wondering, because this is this look at this marriage that ultimately did not last very long and ended in this woman's death and all that kind of thing, like I'm wondering if there will be like an element of that in it, and I'm interested in that. I don't know, but that should be intriguing. The next 5 books are just like, they gave me autumnal vibes. I've been building this TBR like very slowly. Like every time I look at a book and I'm like, ooh, you could be an autumn book, I just stick it in the pile. So I'll just run through these 5. First of all is Chorus of Mushrooms by Hiromi Goto. And the back says, explores the collision of cultures within a family between 3 generations of Japanese Canadian women. At times a Japanese folk legend, at times a love story. Chorus of Mushrooms heralds a major debut in Canadian literature. Obviously, slightly I've chosen this because autumn is a very good mushroom season where I live, and I go on many mushroom walks, and if you want to see my mushroom walks, follow me on Instagram. I post too many pictures of little mushrooms that I find. I don't find anything wildly exotic, I just really like mushrooms and finding them. So a little bit that association, but also I am really interested in this like intergenerational like tension and conflict and that kind of thing. Another author who I read for the first time last autumn actually was Louise Erdrich. I read The Night Watchman and I loved it. So this is the other Louise Erdrich that I already own. This is The Roundhouse. This one I think is going to be quite a hard read because we centre around a woman who is raped on a North Dakota reservation, and her husband seeks justice and he doesn't find any, and it's about this, we really are centering on their child and the impact that this has on their child. I really, really enjoyed The Night Watchman last year, so I just thought I would just try another Louise Erdrich. Maybe this also becomes an autumnal tradition. Who knows? We shall see. I have Braised Pork by Annie Yu. I read my first Annie Yu book at the start of this year, and I really enjoyed it. It was like slightly surreal. I don't know, but I found it a very interesting reading experience, and I wanted to try out more of her work. So this is the work that was published before that, and I think it sounds really intriguing. We follow like a young woman who finds her husband dead in the bathtub, and next to him is a piece of folded paper, a sketch of a strange creature from his dream. He has left her no other sign, and she's like young and she's on her own, and she sort of like sets out on this journey. I think it's going to be quite dreamlike, which again I also felt about the book that I read earlier this year. So I'm really intrigued. I hope that I really like this one, and I hope that Annie becomes an author that I want to like continue to explore as she publishes more work. Zoe Gilbert is someone who I read for the first time last year as well. Wow, look at me, repeat buying people. Mischief Axe I read right at the end of the year, but I actually think it would be a really great book for autumn because it's all to do with Herne the Hunter and his manifestations throughout time, and I loved it so much. It was doing such interesting things with genre, so I picked up Folk, which again is the book that she published before that one. This one is set on the remote island of Neverness, and the villagers' lives are entwined with nature. It's enchantments, seductions, and dangers, and we're just sort of like we're following the course of a generation. We're just sort of like looking at the dramas of their lives and that kind of thing, and it's sort of it says crackling with echoes of ancient folklore. So I think that sounds, I'm really wanting like atmospheric reads. I don't know if you can tell that from this selection. This final fiction book is more one that I'm potentially earmarking for like November when we start to transition into winter, but that's The Half-Life of Valery K by Natasha Pulley. I love Natasha Pulley. She's one of my favourite authors. I think she does beautifully descriptive work. I just love it. This is set in 1963 in a Siberian gulag. We follow a former nuclear specialist, Valery Kolkanov, and he ends up being transported to this town where he's trying to pursue some answers, and it's like, will he be like, this is a dangerous path. Will he survive the search? That kind of thing. I just will read anything Natasha Pulley writes, to be honest with you. Finally, I have 4 non-fiction books that I've earmarked, so I just thought I would run you through those too. I always like to read some nature writing in autumn, and the one I have picked for this time is Ghost Trees, Nature and People in a London Parish by Bob Gilbert. This is a book that my mum has lent me. It's looking at like urban nature and its resilience and its resurgence on our very doorsteps, and I think that that's a really interesting angle. I feel like I've not read that much about like urban nature, so I'm intrigued by this one for sure. My partner has also lent me a book. This is Bard of Liberty, The Political Radicalism of Yola Morganic by Garrett H. Jenkins. Yola Morganic was a political radical, but I'm most familiar with him because he codified a lot of the stuff that is what the Welsh Eisteddfod uses. So a lot of the concepts of like the bards and the bardic symbols and the outfits and all of that kind of stuff like that all comes from Yola Morganic. There's he invented a lot of stuff to do with like bardic things and druidic things and stuff that is often mistaken for being much more ancient than it is, but actually it all came out of this man's mind. So I'm really interested in understanding more about him because I know like a bit, but I don't really know him that much. And I think he's probably going to be a really interesting figure to delve into. Another interesting figure to delve into, I have actually already started reading this one. This will be wrapped up in my September wrap up. But this is Super Infinite, The Transformations of John Donne by Catherine Rundle. John Donne is a Elizabethan poet, but also like so many other things. This man, like, part of what this book is exploring is like he just like reinvented himself so many times. There are so many versions of this man, and I think that sounds so interesting. I have started reading this one. I'm 70 pages in, and I have to say I'm loving it so far. I'm finding this like view on his transformations and all that kind of thing really interesting, and the author has clearly such a passion for him and his writings and all that kind of stuff, and I'm finding it really infectious so far. I know like a little bit of Donne's poetry, but I don't know that much about his actual life and that kind of thing, so I'm already loving this one. And then the final book that I have earmarked that is a non-fiction one is Turning, Lessons from Swimming Berlin's Lakes by Jessica J. Lee. I have previously read and loved Two Trees Make a Forest by Jessica J. Lee, which is nature writing that's focusing on Taiwan, but it's also focusing on like memory and that kind of thing. Her family originally from Taiwan, and but during the writing of that book, she's looking a lot about her like grandfather who has dementia and that kind of thing, and like there's a lot to do with language in it as well. So like all of those things I super loved. This is the book that she wrote before that. There's a theme. Where she spends all 4 seasons wild swimming in lakes. I don't swim. I've come to realise, I was like, when was the last time I swam? I don't know. But I really enjoyed her writing style in that book, and I thought if there was anyone going to make me interested in swimming, it will be Jessica J. Lee. So I'm interested to read this, and I'm hoping, it seems like it will be quite like contemplative, because it talks about how like she talks, you know, like swimming helps her like face her fears and help her break free and that kind of thing. So I don't know, but I'm hopeful that I will enjoy this. That is everything that is on my sort of like mood board TBR. I would love to hear your thoughts on any of these books, absolutely. I always ask this, I don't know, and if you're a long-term viewer, you've probably already told me, but like, what books are you drawn to in the autumn season? And do you have any recommendations that you would give based on these types of things that I'm always interested in reading around this time? Do leave me a comment and let me know if there's any books that you think like, oh Sophie, you absolutely have to read this, it fits that concept perfectly, because as you can see from the historian, I will pick them up and I will hold on to them for a year in wait so that I can read them at the perfect time. But yeah, any thoughts, please do leave a comment down below. Otherwise, I hope you're having a really lovely day, and I will see you next time for something different.